Chapter 2, Progress. You've heard the cliche, one day at a time. Well, we truly learned how to take it one day at a time. It was more like 1 minute at a time. We still didn't know what Michelle's future would look like. Slowly, she started to make progress. 2 days after the stroke, we had our first response from her. While the nurses were doing their regular checks, she responded to commands. At first, it was, lift 2 fingers. She lifted 2 fingers. Wiggle your toes. She wiggled her toes. Squeeze my hand. She squeezed their hand. This was very good news. There is always the positive. There is always the possibility that people who have experienced serious brain trauma will become brain dead. But because Michelle responded to commands, we found hope that she was going to be okay. Only time would tell what she would get back. We were still told to prepare. We were still told to prepare for the worst. At the time, I knew Michelle couldn't communicate with us, but I was sure she could hear us. I wanted to give her as much encouragement as. So obviously there are errors as I'm editing. So obviously there are a lot of errors as I'm reading. I make mistakes, and this is like the raw version right here. So what you are looking at, this is what it takes. And I have a software that I use where I'm editing as I go. So finished product, there are no mistakes, or at least as few mistakes as possible. At the time, I knew Michelle couldn't communicate with us, but I was sure she could hear us. I wanted to give her as much encouragement as possible. So at home, I recorded Connor. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. All right. For anyone listening, for anyone watching this on YouTube, the reading, like doing an audiobook, is not easy. It's not easy. It takes a lot of work because you can just imagine like you're reading for about 30 minutes at a time, and you make mistakes, and you got to listen to it all, and you got to see where the mistakes are, and you got to find the beginning and the end of the mistakes and delete the middle part, and it's a lot, but I'm going to be thankful for the finished product though. At the time, I knew Michelle couldn't communicate with us, but I was sure she could hear us. I wanted to give her as much encouragement as possible. So at home, I recorded Connor reading some scripture passages. I also captured Easton saying encouraging words and some of Caden's babble. When I played those recordings for Michelle, I knew she heard them because her heart rate would increase. It's probably safe to say she was excited to hear her boys. Unfortunately, her increased heart rate meant that I had to stop playing the recordings. Since that could raise her internal temperature and cause further brain damage, I'm sure she enjoyed listening while she could. Wait. Okay. So I just had a comma there and the pause was too long, so I don't think it sounded. So I'm going to take it back to the beginning of the paragraph. At the time, I knew Michelle couldn't communicate with us, but I was sure she could hear us. I wanted to give her as much encouragement as possible. So at home, I recorded Connor reading some scripture passages. I also captured Easton saying encouraging words and some of Caden's babble. When I played those recordings for Michelle, I knew she heard them because her heart rate would increase. It's probably safe to say she was excited to hear her boys. Unfortunately, her increased heart rate meant that I had to stop playing the recordings, since that could raise her internal temperature and cause further brain damage. I'm sure she enjoyed listening while she could. It's amazing how tragedy can shape your perspective. We learn to appreciate all the little things in life that we so often took for granted. For instance, just watching Michelle lift 2 fingers gave us so much joy. I challenge you to spend some time reflecting on what you have and what you're able to do. Allow this to give you an attitude of gratitude. Friends in high places. On top of having a friend who was a nurse in the same unit where Michelle was receiving care, an elder of our church, Gary, was a highly respected cardiac surgeon. I first met him in the hospital after Michelle was admitted, and it felt like having him on our side gave us instant access to whatever Michelle needed. He funneled requests to the leaders on our support team, and they listened to him. He also sat with Michelle whenever possible at night and prayed over her. Prayer was not lacking for my beautiful wife. Michelle's lead physical therapist was amazing and quickly became loved by the whole family. Just one day after the stroke, she had Michelle on her feet. That was no small task. Pastor Scott came to visit that day and just happened to walk in as we were working to get Michelle out of bed. It took 2 therapists, her nurse, and me to accomplish the feat. There were lots of wires and lines that we had to maneuver around, and she was still intubated. Getting Michelle on her feet as quickly as possible was vital. Standing sent a signal to her brain that told her this was the correct position to be in, rather than lying in bed. While she was upright, we moved around all the equipment and transferred her to a reclining chair. It was important to get her sitting up at least once a day. This was all part of the healing process to start the rewiring of her brain. Leading the Lord's army. Within the first week, I called a meeting to have all the elders of the church come to pray over her. Gathering all the men at one time was a difficult undertaking, but they all showed up. First, we prayed out in the waiting room. Then, I went back to her room by myself to let her nurse know everyone was there. Initially, only 2 or 3 people were supposed to visit her at a time because her condition was so volatile. But they made an exception under one condition. If her heart rate increased, everyone would leave. Before we entered the room, we prayed that her heart rate would stay consistent. As I marched down the hall with at least 10 elders behind me, I felt like we were going to war. I led the army, and our adversary was the devil. We all joined in a circle around Michelle and prayed. Instead of her heart rate increasing, it went down. I believe the Holy Spirit calmed her. Each man took their turn speaking life over Michelle and praying to the one who can sympathize with our weaknesses. Hebrews 4:15. I continuously looked at her monitor and watched her heart rate, and when I saw the rhythm decrease, I knew Satan was losing. I could only imagine what the people outside the room, the doctors, nurses, and others who were there with love. Okay. I could only imagine what the people outside the room, the doctors, nurses, and others who were there with loved ones, would have thought seeing all the men gathered in a circle of prayer, and what the impact I could only imagine what the people outside of the room, the doctors, nurses, and others who were there with loved ones would have thought seeing all the men gathered in a circle of prayer and what the impact the sight might have had on them. Yes, God had a reason for Michelle's stroke, and he still does. What Michelle went through and lives with every day is hard, but I again consider Romans 8:18. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that is to be revealed to us. Missed diagnosis. We quickly became accustomed to different healthcare workers coming in throughout the day. There were internal medicine doctors, nurses, nursing assistants, respiratory therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, social workers, chaplains, the IV team, neurologists, radiologists, x-ray techs, the list goes on. It was very helpful that I was a healthcare worker myself. As a healthcare worker, I understood the message about what the medical team was conveying about the severity of the stroke and her future. With this understanding, I was also able to communicate to family and friends what was going on, and my background gave me an idea of what to expect. I had become comfortable talking with doctors, having worked with them every day. One other advantage was knowing the doctors worked for us. Having this mindset was crucial as Michelle advanced through the labyrinth of care during her 6 months away from home. Knowing that they worked for us meant that we could request someone new if we didn't feel Michelle was getting the care she needed. Michelle was released from the NCCU within 2 weeks and was transferred up to the ward. We knew Michelle wouldn't be at this hospital much longer, since it was out of our insurance network. Once she was transferred to the ward, the insurance company felt they could handle her care at their own facility. While we were thankful for Michelle's progress, her leaving the NCCU was bittersweet. We knew where her next destination would be, and I had significant trust issues with them. The moyamoya disease could have been caught and corrected prior to the stroke that almost killed her. Michelle had been complaining of headaches most of her life. Over the 12 years we were married, she had complained about headaches many times, and all that had been done was a CT scan of her sinuses. When we became enrolled with our insurance company, her providers never requested her old medical records. At every appointment Michelle had where her headaches were the issue, she would mention that her paternal grandmother had died of what we believed was a brain aneurysm when she was 50, but because an autopsy wasn't performed, we weren't sure. We learned that moyamoya disease is hereditary, and it's predominant in Asian women. Her grandma was full Japanese, which makes Michelle 1/4 Japanese. It's possible her grandma had and was killed. By moyamoya. My trust issues with our healthcare network originated from a comment I read days after the stroke. Because of Michelle's history with headaches, I had wanted to dive into her medical records to see what was discussed at her appointments. Here is one comment from a doctor's note dated 1.5 years prior. Here is one comment from a doctor's note dated 1.5 years before the stroke. Headaches. Intermittent. Right-sided sharp. Here is one comment from a doctor's note dated 1.5 years before the stroke. Headaches. Intermittent. Right-sided sharp. Intense. Well-localized pain that will last 1 minute or so, occasionally will recur, stops her in her tracks. At that appointment, Michelle was diagnosed with anxiety and placed on an antidepressant. She was told that she's a busy mom and not to worry. If the doctors had ordered an MRI, the Moyamoya disease could have been caught and corrected with a bypass surgery. This doctor worked for the same company that had requested Michelle. This doctor worked for the same company that had requested Michelle once she was discharged. This doctor worked for the same company that had requested Michelle once she was discharged from the NCCU. Another golden opportunity where her condition could have been discovered was when Michelle had sporadic fainting episodes. One of those had caused her to fall, and we had sought answers after that. It was thought that the fainting was due to heart issues. She had an EKG study and was instructed to wear a heart monitor, and both returned normal results. After that, nothing else was done. Aside from the care itself, we also weren't looking forward to the transfer because of the hospital's location. We lived in Beaverton, and the hospital was about a 45-minute drive from our home on a good day. That increased our travel time by at least 25 minutes each way. It might not sound like a long time, but when you do it every day, it adds up. We wanted to be with her every day to make sure she was getting taken care of, and because we didn't want her to be alone. Between Michelle's parents, friends from our church, and me, somebody was with Michelle nearly all day, every day. I'm incredibly thankful we had so much support. It was sad to hear that we were the exception. So many people spend their hospital stays alone, without a loved one to help with their care. Finding my voice. We knew right away that the culture was different at the second hospital. In the first one, they used baby when talking about our baby, but in the second, our baby was called a fetus. In addition to this, instead of the life-giving words spoken at the first, words of gloom were used. The hospitalist on staff at the time told us that Michelle would never be able to open her right eye because the bleed pinched off one of her optic nerves. Another doctor, the neurologist, told us that she would never be able to eat again because the bleed pinched off her brainstem, which is where the signal to swallow comes from. Both doctors spoke these words to me as if Michelle wasn't in the room, which upset me and raised my guard even more. Both doctors spoke these words to me as if Michelle wasn't in the room, which upset me and raised my guard even more. It was during this time that I found my voice. Both doctors spoke these words to me as if Michelle wasn't in the room. Oh, I forgot a period there. Okay. Interesting. I just read the book and I found a place where I missed a period. Okay. Chapter 2, page 35. There's a missing period. Huh. It's been edited a lot and somehow we missed it. It's all good. Both doctors spoke these words to me as if Michelle wasn't in the room, which upset me and raised my guard even more. It was during this time that I found my voice. I needed to speak up for her. She couldn't do it. Our child couldn't do it. I used my occupation towards my advantage. But what about those who aren't in healthcare? Because I work with doctors and talk with them every day, I'm not intimidated by a few extra letters placed in front of their name. And fortunately for Michelle, She had a team of family and friends who were all in agreement. But how many don't have that? How many people are intimidated by doctors and go along with things they feel may not be in their best interest? Just to be clear, I have the utmost respect for healthcare providers, but some should not be in the business of caring for people. Shortly after the transfer, I called a meeting with the key players in Michelle's care. I wanted to set the tone and to let them know that we were there as Michelle's voice. Here are some key items I brought up at that meeting. The following are direct quotes from the notes I took to prepare. Please plan and deliver care for Michelle the way you would do for your family. What's inside her uterus is a baby, not a fetus. Please do not refer to my son or daughter as a fetus. Whether the baby makes it or not, God has a plan for that child. Her blood pressure was controlled better at the first hospital. Her blood pressure was controlled better at the first hospital. It was and is important to regulate her blood pressure because of the moya-moya disease. Her pain seemed to be managed better at the other hospital. She was in a lot of pain from the surgery. Why isn't she being pushed more for PT? We knew the importance of Michelle getting on her feet and being transferred to the chair, but many times days had gone by when this did not happen. Another topic we discussed pertained to the future operation she would need. Half of Michelle's skull was being kept in the freezer inside a bone bag. She needed to heal more, and the swelling from her brain had to be completely gone before surgeons could rejoin it with the other part of her skull. We also needed to discuss when the left side of her brain could be corrected. Because the moya-moya disease affected both sides of the brain. There was a chance she could have a stroke on the left side as well. We asked the neurosurgeon how many bypass surgeries he had done to correct moya-moya. His response was, none. They recommended Michelle have the surgery at a hospital in San Francisco. That was still within their network. They recommended Michelle have the surgery at a hospital in San Francisco. That was still within their network. Thankfully, we decided against that since we knew of a local moya-moya expert who had done many of the bypass surgeries we needed. I believe it was providential that Michelle was initially diverted away from the Beaverton Hospital and to the one in Portland for many reasons, but the main one being that this is where I believe it was providential, Michelle, initially. But the main one being that is where, okay, makes sense. Okay, those watching YouTube, I usually pause like this in between my mistakes so that I can watch the waveforms on the audio and I can see where it picks up. So I'm going to have a pause here before I continue. I believe it was providential that Michelle was initially diverted away from the Beaverton Hospital and to the one in Portland for many reasons. But the main one being that is where we met Dr. Vivek Deshmukh. He was starting the process of making his office one of the few moya-moya centers in America able to perform the bypass surgery. Dr. Deshmukh is not only an amazing surgeon, but he has great bedside manner as well, and it's hard to find a doctor with both skill sets. Dr. Deshmukh wasn't the surgeon who operated on Michelle the day of the stroke, but he became one of our greatest allies in the subsequent days. He checked on Michelle and the family regularly. Immediately following the stroke, he had a hunch Moyamoya disease was the culprit, and he performed a cerebral angiogram to verify. After 2 weeks, after the 2 weeks we spent working with him, we were convinced that he was the one we wanted to have perform Michelle's surgery to correct the arteriovenous malformation, AVM. While Michelle was a patient at the second hospital, we often spoke up. The physical and occupational therapy she received there was nothing like at the first. It was hard to settle for the new care she was getting when we already knew what good therapy looked like. We often inquired about why Michelle wasn't getting out of bed. We wondered why she wasn't being pushed at all. It was also difficult with the constant changing of doctors that were caring for her. We would get used to one after a couple of days, and then they would rotate. Each new doctor brought new ideas, some good, some not so good, and some terrible. Finding the silver lining. To be clear, the care she received wasn't all bad. Some of Michelle's nurses were believers, which brought us encouragement. We were told some nurses prayed over her and read her scripture. On a couple of occasions, I heard songs by Mercy Me coming from Michelle's room. A nurse played it on her cell phone so Michelle could listen. That made my heart happy. It was exciting for me to hear that she was getting prayed over even while we weren't there. Prayer was, and still is, something we covet. Never underestimate the power of prayer. Many times, as I sat next to Michelle, I found myself reading the Bible. I needed the encouragement. God spoke to me often as I dug into His Word. I also had plenty of time to connect with friends on Facebook. I treated it as if it were a diary, and I received additional encouragement from people's comments. As I went back and read some old Facebook posts, I was reminded of one of my prayers. I had spent a lot of time in the Psalms, and in the post I had quoted Psalms 25, 4 through 6. Make me know your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. Lead me in your truth and teach me. For you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day. I talked with our nurses often. I shared about our family, our faith, and about how we were coping with the current tragedy. I wrote Bible verses on the whiteboard in the room. One of the rooms she was assigned to had a wall covered in mirrors. On that wall, I wrote Isaiah 40, verses 28 through 31. That reads, Do you not know, have you not? That reads, Do you not know? Have you not heard? The everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the heavens of earth. That reads, Do you not know? Have you not heard? The everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, does not become weary or tired. His understanding is inscrutable. He gives strength to the weary, and to him who lacks might, he increases power. Though youths grow weary and tired, and vigorous young men stumble badly, yet those who wait for the Lord will gain new strength. They will mount up with wings like eagles. They will run and not get tired. They will walk and not become weary. It's exciting to think about how many people heard the gospel while Michelle was away from home. Some might have heard it for the first time. Some reading this book might be hearing it for the first time. 3 days after the stroke, I wrote a group text. It's exciting to think about how many people heard the gospel while Michelle was away from home. Some might have. All right, now I'm kind of getting tired. I'm almost done with the chapter. Let's go. Finish strong. It's exciting to think about how many people heard the gospel while Michelle was away from home. Some might have heard it for the first time. Some reading this book might be hearing it for the okay. It's exciting to think about how many people heard the gospel while Michelle was away from home. Some might have heard it for the first time. Some listening to this book might be hearing it for the first time. 3 days after the stroke, I wrote a group text message to my close friends that read, "There are at least two good things that I want to have happen through this. One, more people coming to Jesus. Two, being able to encourage and strengthen others in their faith, which is already happening." Early on, a deep seed was planted in my heart, a seed which spoke to me, telling me that the suffering we endured ought not to be wasted. As I write this book, that text is being carried out. I have no idea who will listen to these words, but I speak in faith, knowing that they will reach the people who need them. This isn't just our story, this is God's story, and He will put it in front of those who need to hear it. All right, I'm done. Now the fun part. Now I have a program that I use. It's called Audacity. So I'm going to be uploading the audio into Audacity, and then I can further edit from there. And then the finished product. So I have some settings that I do to make it compliant for the the Audible software. And then I upload the finished product, and it's gonna be amazing. Let's go.